We're back for another live kind of application testimonial. I don't know what you'd call this exactly. Interview with a previous applicant, I should say. An amazing one, Bryan, who applied. See, 25-26 cycle. Yes, 25-26 cycle. I always get them mixed up, and had some great success. And I'm really excited, Bryan. I'm excited to talk to you, and I'm excited for people to hear about a little of your story and your application cycle.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me here, Alejandro.
Absolutely. Okay, Bryan, let's just get into it really quick. Tell the audience a little bit about you, who you are, a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, so I'm a traditional applicant. Like I submitted my MCAT at the end of my third year, went to UCLA. I guess just for my stats, I had a 3.9 and 3.9 GPA, 521 MCAT. And really going into application cycle, I was kind of nervous because, most people nowadays I feel like are taking a gap year. So I just felt like I was kind of a little behind on that and just not having enough hours or enough activities, meaningful experiences under my belt. And that was like a main concern that I had, and one that I really addressed to Alejandro going into like his program. And I just felt that through like a lot of the conversations and meetings I had with Alejandro, a lot of the office hours, things that we had together, I felt like I really was able to like tailor the small things that I had in my jobs, in my club activities, to build it into a more meaningful story that really showed schools what I was all about.
That's awesome. And Bryan, feel free to, I know you're saying my name and stuff like that. Feel free to converse with me,
Yeah.
It's really cool. I know it's easy to say kind of the third person like Alejandro, but okay. So Bryan, people that are watching this right now, okay, they're going to hear you and they immediately they heard traditional applicant, 3.9, 529, 521 MCAT. I don't relate with this guy whatsoever. That's going to be like 99% of the audience thinking this right now. But we know that, at least I know, doing this for so many years, that stats are not everything. In fact, I've had applicants in the past that have come to me that have had exactly those stats. I remember 2 years ago, I had somebody DM me. They actually had a higher MCAT score. They had like a 524. And they said, I have a 3.9, 0 interview invites, 0 acceptances. And then I've had people in the past where it's like, I had one applicant, 476 MCAT. And she got an interview invite to an MD school in California, which is, so it's just clearly the stats aren't everything. What do you think made you kind of stand out? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, honestly, I felt like I was almost going in that trajectory with those high stat applicants you were talking about earlier, because kind of like early on in the application cycle, I wasn't getting that many interviews. And well, one thing was because I was sending my secondaries kind of late, but also I think my secondary quality wasn't as great. And so definitely towards like the latter half or third of the schools I sent my secondaries to, I really kind of like tailored my stories better and really tried to show them that, well, first of all, I come from Southeast Asian descent. And so I really tried to, put in my family's experiences and the general experience of the Southeast Asian community, because I have a lot of work with organizations at UCLA in those communities. And so I think just bringing more of that identity into my application really helped with the schools that I received interviews from later on, because most of the interviews I got were from those schools that I sent secondaries to later in the cycle.
Yeah, I love that. Like tailoring those secondaries and really kind of like getting them dialed in, right? Let me ask you this, Bryan. We shared stats. How many interview invites, how many acceptances did you end up getting that cycle?
Yeah, so I got 6 interviews and 2 acceptances. The rest were waitlists. The one I'm going to attend in July is Mayo Clinic in Arizona. So really stoked about that. Another one was a California MD school. It was California North State. But yeah.
Wow. So that's a bombshell right there. Like, right? Mayo Clinic. So yeah. I think that's probably the dream for any pre-med on the face of this earth, to get accepted to the Mayo Clinic. Let me ask you this, Bryan. What was that? Walk us through what it's like getting accepted Mayo Clinic. Where were you at? What were you doing when you got that call?
You know, it was wild. Because Mayo, they send out all their acceptance calls on the same day, on February 2nd. And so I was waiting on February 2nd. And no call came in. So I was like, oh no, it's over, it's over. But then a few days later on like the Friday of that week, I got a call from Pennsylvania, which is like not where Mayo is at all.
Oh,
But it was
man.
my interviewer. And like, yeah, and I just woke up and it was like, whoa, like I'm so glad I took this call. But they said they misplaced my information and that's why it came late. So I was like, okay, you kind of gave me a panic attack, but I'm really happy that it all worked out in the end. You know, Mayo is insane. Like I said that earlier, if I got into Mayo, that would be actually insane. And here we are today.
Oh my
So,
gosh. So they misplaced your application, whatever that means. They
who
misplaced
knows? Yeah,
information
no idea
and
what that means.
gave you near heart attack. What'd your family think about that? And tell us a little bit about your family. I know a little bit. I know your family. I know, like, I don't know them, but I know of like what we've discussed. What they think? What are they doing?
Yeah, so my family is actually they're immigrants from Burma or Myanmar. And they came when they were like about like middle age. My mom did her medical school and training in Burma. And so when she came to the US, my dad had to kind of give up his job or so that my mom could, you know, work while he took care of me and my sister at home. And so my mom had to do her residency and all that in the US. So she kind of has some like knowledge of the US healthcare system, but definitely not like all this application stuff that's going crazy right now with all the competition. But yeah, I think definitely my parents pushed me into this zone, but I kind of figured out that medicine is what I wanted for myself during my undergrad years when there was some family things that went on in my life.
That's
So
amazing.
that's a little bit about my family. Yeah.
It's so cool. That's so cool. You know, you come from like these kind of immigrant roots. Your mom's a physician. You know, she had to do residency over here. And let me ask you this, Bryan. What's something, you know, you're a very successful applicant, right? And what's something that you would advise applicants who are gearing up for this cycle, maybe the next cycle? What's one piece of information that you'd really want to stress to them about applying to medical school, looking back at it now?
Yeah. I think for me, one of the biggest things was imposter syndrome. You know, you always feel like you're never enough compared to these other like, you know, great people who've done crazy research, have crazy clinical experiences. Even me, being someone who has, you know, like what you'd say high stats, I was worried as well for myself. But I think one of the biggest things that helps me was when I attended your office hours and you used the phrase, you know, everyone is a shaker and mover or mover and shaker. I don't know which one.
Yeah.
Everyone is a mover and shaker in some way, you know. You just have to figure out how you moved and shook things.
Yeah.
And so that really like stuck with me. And so I tried to think back like, like in what ways did I make an impact? And in what ways, you know, did that impact make an impact on me as well? And I think that's kind of the philosophy that I really wanted to put into like the latter half of my secondaries. And those were the secondaries that turned into interviews. So I think that's a really important piece of advice. Even if you don't think, you know, you match up to anyone else, you don't need to. You just need to figure out, you know, how to present yourself in the best way and, you know, be impressive.
That's amazing.
Everyone is impressive in some way. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, we've talked about that. It's like being that kind of shaker, being the mover and stuff like that. When you were on your interview, because I know you said you had 6 interviews, did anybody bring up your application? Was there anything that kind of like they asked you, you're like, I'm surprised they're asking me about that, or maybe they're offering compliments on this? Were you surprised at all about any of the comments you were getting in the interviews about your application, or were there no real comments?
I think there was only one interview that was actually like an open interview.
Okay.
And they just asked about like, you know, just a few basic questions about each thing. One of the hobbies I did was like lion dancing, so they just asked about that because that was like unique, but it's pretty basic stuff. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's so good. That's so good. Okay, so for the Bryan, and just maybe a couple more questions here. I'm curious. People are always thinking their application. They're like, okay, MCAT GPA. Okay, sure, that's one thing. And I always tell people, you need to have just a good enough MCAT and GPA, right? You want to do your best, but just have a good enough one. Have a good school list that you're building, right? A very optimized school list. That's super important. Of course, apply early. That's really important. Have your writing pieces down. And then you also want to, have some things that like clinical experience. People need to have clinical experience. People, maybe plus or minus research. It's not required, but it's nice to have. Was there something in your application that you did, like an activity or extracurricular, that you felt like really made you stand out? Like, this is awesome. I'm proud of this.
Yeah, one of the things I did was I started a nonprofit for childhood obesity prevention. Basically, we just go out to elementary schools in underserved areas. The first one we did was in East LA, and we give the kids health education sessions. And I think it was just something that I was really passionate about, and being able to speak about that in my interviews. It was also something that was kind of like clickbait for like interviewers. Like whenever I mentioned that, they were like, "Oh, like tell me more about that." And so, yeah, I feel like just having something that you're really passionate about and you can speak to would be really helpful.
I love that. It's that clickbait. We talked about that in interviews and stuff like that. And we talked about like the Easter egg method that I teach. And it's just something easy for people to grab onto, especially interviewers, for you to kind of direct the conversation and you to direct the interview and stuff like that. So the applicant feels like they have the power in a sense. Just kind of closing up here, Bryan. What do you feel like looking back, kind of working with me, being in this program? What was there anything, and you kind of mentioned something already about what I said, being a shaker and a mover, which is really cool. Was there anything in particular within the program of Market the Mission that you found like, wow, this was really helpful? This in particular was very helpful for me. Was there anything like that in the program?
Yeah, I think honestly, the best part of Market the Mission is the office hours. And I feel like they're actually so helpful because for me, I got writer's block all the time when I was writing my secondaries. I took a really, really long time writing them. But it was so nice because you had, weekly office hours, and it was just like, it's basically like a one-on-one chat. And it was like personalized edits every week,
Mm-hmm.
And it was on call too. So it was like live. I didn't have to like wait like, a week or two for you to respond back to me. So I thought that was really helpful. It was very personalized, and I think that's something that you don't really see a lot from other programs, honestly.
Yeah, it's what I really kind of pride myself on, and it's what I love to do. Bryan, parting words of wisdom for the pre-med out there who may not have a 521, they may not have a 3.9, right? Or maybe it is that pre-med that has just a high stat applicant, right? And maybe they felt just like you, where they're like, oh my gosh, is this enough? Like, am I doing enough, right? What words of wisdom would you give this pre-med kind of gearing up, looking towards medical school, maybe the next cycle, maybe the cycle after that? What's something that you would kind of leave them with?
I think, honestly, it's really the advice that you told me, that everyone is a shaker and mover in some way, So even if imposter syndrome is hitting you really hard, just think back, what's like, even like the smallest thing that you've done to make an impact on someone or something. I think just reflecting back on those small things can really like help boost your morale a little bit and get you out of that ditch. And it's kind of all I had to say, honestly.
I love it. It's like being the shaker and the mover, because that's what medical schools are looking for, especially big ones like Mayo Clinic. And really, I think when we say that, people are maybe like, well, what is that shaker and mover? And it's like, you are someone who has identified a problem, and you didn't just idly sit by and say, well, that kind of sucks, right? It's like, no, you figured out what to do to fix it, to alleviate it, to help it. Maybe you started a nonprofit. Maybe you started this like smaller project organization. Maybe you started this volunteer group. Maybe you started this whatever to kind of alleviate that problem and push the needle, at least to get people talking about it. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about with the shaker and the mover. And that's what medical schools are looking for. These individuals who are really discovering their own passion, figuring out what they're good at doing, seeing a problem, and then going out and executing. And Mayo Clinic is looking for that. That's why exactly you're going to the medical school there. So it's awesome.
Right.
All right, Bryan. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate your time. I'm really excited for you. And and hopefully everyone got some good information out of this. And we will see you all in the next interview. All right. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.